Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
Hi, thanks for the intro. So is anyone currently looking or thinking about raising money? Okay, so it's an interesting topic for now. Okay, I'm going to dive into this and just sort of go through this really quickly, and then I want to try and more open it up for people to ask questions, because I think that's probably part of the reason why people are here, and I've got a limited amount of time. So I'll just go right through this. So I've been advising and investing in companies for the past 16 years, done IPOs and M&A, and I've had the chance to invest personally in some companies. I used to have Supercell on this slide, but I'm no longer a shareholder because I just sold the rest of my shares in May. And I'm a partner at LVP. We've been investing together for a few years now. We raised our first fund with outside money last year with ourselves, Nexon, Wargaming, and Dom Matrick. And we've invested in a bunch of companies in the past 12 months that are listed here, ranging from game developers to back-end tech and services. So this is what I'm going to just quickly talk about, and I'll just get on with it. Lots of people want to raise money, but not everybody's always ready to raise money. And it's important. And I'm not saying that you should have everything that's checkmarked on there whatsoever, but you do have to be ready, both from a business standpoint and just sort of a mental standpoint, because fundraising is not for the faint of heart. Be prepared to hear no lots. But I think essentially when you're fundraising the first time, you got to have the core team together, because it's really hard to raise money if it's just one or two people. It's not impossible. We funded a one-person company that we found a CEO for. But anyways, these are just some of the things that you need to think about before you actually go out and raise money. You've got to have a quick elevator pitch. I mean, you never know when you might meet someone who's willing to listen to you for like 2 minutes, and you got to have a pitch ready. What's the one line that really sums up your company? What makes you different in a way that people are going to remember that? It's like, yeah, maybe I should talk to that person more. People like using analogies. X for Y. We are the EA Sports for mobile. And it's not about the game that you're working on at all. It's more about what you want your company to be. How many games a year are you going to be? Are you going to be disruptive, and so on? And then as you're putting a deck together, you got to think about how you're going to talk about your key team members, what's their experience in the games or outside of games, and what do you think is going to be important in terms of those roles for helping the company to be successful. Traction, if you're a total startup, obviously you're going to have zero traction, but maybe you've got traction just in terms of you've built the team. But you need to think about what are going to be the key timelines and milestones as you build up your company, because we get approaches from so many people. They've got a game they want to show us, and that's nice, but we're not investing in games, we're investing in companies, and that's why people need to sort of change their thinking. So whatever it is that you've got some traction, if you got loads of Twitter followers, whatever, just any type of something that shows some success, talk about it. Know your market, and yes, games is whatever, it's a $100 billion a year business. That's nice, but it's not so interesting. I mean, in your category of genre games you're going after and the platforms that you're going after, sort of define it a bit more. We're going to be in strategy games for mobile, and that's a X billion-dollar market. For example, this is all mobile games, just in terms of showing some quick data, 30 billion plus next year. And then if you've got some game concepts that you're thinking about, that you spent some time on, or even ideally a prototype is what we like to see. Just understand, the genre that you're going to go in, what are the gamers going to be able to do, what's different and special. I mean, doing a clone of a very famous game is not necessarily the best strategy, but taking a game that's been done before and making it better in various interesting ways is more interesting. And be very visual. That's what really can help sell that. Some great character art. This is from Dwarfs and Dragons from Onodrone. And then, how are you thinking about your tech? Are you going to have a tech platform that's different? Are you going to use Unity? And then, what are you going to use with Unity to give that special sauce to your games? And how does that whole tech platform work for you? What are you thinking about in terms of analytics, CRM? What are you going to do for user acquisition? Which platforms are you going to focus on, and why? Publishing, are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to work with a publisher in selected markets, globally? Who, why? Are you had any talks about terms? So you may know how to make games, but not everybody knows how to actually get users. And it's so important today, for people that are publishing games themselves, is how are you going to get the users, how are you going to retain the users, and how are you going to monetize those users? And you got to be able to have thoughtful answers on how you're going to do those things. Maybe you're just going to hire great people. Fine. Is that in your budget? Are you going to be able to afford great people? So you just need to think about that. Financials, and then just, when you're starting up a company, it's finger up in the air in terms of being able to predict what your success is going to be. But, if you want to raise money from VCs, you got to be very ambitious. So if you go into a VC with, you're going to be able to do $5 million a year in 3 years' time, that's not really interesting. If you're going to be able to do $50 million or $100 million a year, that's more interesting. And it's all about, how are you thinking about how you're going to build up your business, and what is the potential for you to actually to do that. And then competition. So, who do you think are going to be the key competitors in the types of games that you're going to make, and why? And then why do you think that your team and your games will be successful? And you need to really think about that. And if you should play all those games, obviously, to really understand that, and have done some research on how well funded those companies, and ultimately how you're going to be able to compete against them. So investment, I'm always surprised at how many pitches we get by email from folks with their decks, and they don't say anything about how much money they're raising. And it's just very easy for us just to toss it, because it's just, we don't want to have to go back just to ask that question, because it's a quick filter. If someone's coming to us to raise 10 million, it's not for us, because we're a seed fund. So you need to think about that when you're targeting the types of investors, that you target them right. Because, anyone who comes to us trying to raise more than 5 million clearly hasn't read our website or doesn't care, so why should we want to talk to them? And investors care about that. You've done some research on them. And then you need to think about the types of investors that you're going to go after. If you're raising a seed round or a Series A, Series B, there's different types of VCs for each of those categories. There's some that do all of them. But most of them are pretty focused in terms of what level they come in a company. But the number one thing is, besides the fundraising, you got to be focused on growing your company, and you can't lose track of that, because fundraising can be a massive job, but you got to get on with doing something with your company. You just can't just sit and wait until fundraising happens, because it can take a while, or it may not even happen. And thanks to living in a digital world, we've got crowdfunding, which has become really popular. I'm not so sure how popular it is today. I think it's more happening with sort of PC developers for Kickstarter and Indiegogo. But some people have been able to raise hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions, on there. Before, or sort of as part of the fundraising process, there's lots of people that you can start to go and learn, because maybe you need to learn a few things before you go out and raise money. Jason from Execution Labs is here from Montreal. One of the places in North America that we suggest people go, because they can go there and they can learn, they get a bit of funding. So there's a few places in Europe, there's a few places in North America, and just get to know the people there and other people that have been through there or are there, and just understand if it's the right place for you to go, both in terms of the company and the location. Angel investors, this can be sort of, sometimes it's an easy place to raise money, sometimes it's not. It really depends on your network. It's obviously easy to go to friends and family, but it's not always the best thing to go to friends and family. I'm a big fan of AngelList. I just think what they've done is amazing. Anybody can just put a profile on there and start connecting with investors on a global basis. It's predominantly American, but there's a lot of people who've raised a lot of money on there. Government funding, have a look at what has been done in Finland. They probably have the best program in the world with Techus. I mean, they're doling out tens of millions to tech companies on an annual basis, in terms of cheap loans, subsidies, grants, tax credits. Quebec has been very good as well. It's time-consuming. People typically work with some consultants to help them go through the application process. But for us as investors, Finland's great, because for every euro we've been putting in our startups, they've been able to raise another euro of free government money. So it's fantastic leverage. Seed funds, listed ourselves with some of the ones we've done. There's Initial, who's done a lot of game investments. 500 startups, also here in San Francisco, who's been involved in a lot of game companies. Just get to know who, wherever you are or in your region that has been investing in game startups. If an investor has never invested in the game sector before, it's usually a pretty tough sell for them to really understand the business, because it's very different from a normal tech company. Venture capital, Benchmark, Sequoia, Accel, Signia, all the US firms have all been pretty active. But if you want to look for sources, you go on AngelList, go on the local venture capital associations. They tend to have these in a lot of the different countries, and these are the European and American ones. Once you get to a certain size, you're going to go raise 20, 30, 50 million plus. These are some of the firms that have invested in some of the bigger deals. But don't expect that that's always going to happen or even needs to happen. Strategic investors, this is a topic that's becoming more popular these days, thanks to Tencent, NetEase, Nexon, Wargaming. They're all becoming very active in doing even early stage investments in game companies. And you just need to get to know the folks and understand their strategy and do those deals, and people work for you in terms of what they are looking for and what they need. But they've got lots of capital, and they're doing a lot of deals these days. Here's a bunch more from all kinds of different categories. Games is very important. It's the #1 revenue category on smartphones these days, so people are paying more attention to it. So you've thought about the deck, you thought about investors. How are you going to contact them now? You've got to have your elevator pitch ready. Best thing is if you can reach out to someone that that knows the people that you're targeting. People love hearing from people they know. They tend to pay more attention to those emails than people that they don't know. Let everybody and within your network that you're actually fundraising. You never know that they may know someone that you don't realize that they do know. It's a very small world. Go to events like this and just introduce yourself. And sometimes even the cold calls or emails work if they're done really well. At Series A or later, sometimes people hire bankers. That's really a personal thing. One of the things I do suggest when you're thinking about or you're out actually active raising money is if you haven't done much in terms of promoting your company from a corporate profile standpoint or social media standpoint, you should do something. It can only help if you do it right. Whether it's getting an article in TechCrunch or VentureBeat or Wall Street Journal or some other games press, just in terms of talking about something really different that you're doing, you'd be amazed sometimes at the inbound calls that can drive. And having social media is just so powerful these days. One of the companies we invested in here in California, Radiant, is doing a fighting game MMO, and they just opened up the alpha to all public yesterday for the Rising Thunder game. And this is a new company, and they got 400 retweets on it. And I'm like, I don't know how they did that. But they're using social media really well. So your first pitch meeting, practice. Don't go in without practicing, because the smart people will just, shred you alive. Make sure your demo works. Don't rely on Wi-Fi, because that doesn't always work. Research the people and firm. You never know where you're going to have something in common to talk about besides your pitch, because it's every business is about people, and people so often forget about that. You got to get to know and build a relationship with people. You typically got to have an hour. You got 45 minutes to pitch, and you got 15 minutes of Q&A, and stick to those times, because most of them, will stick to those times. Sometimes if they really like what they see and they've got the time, they'll keep going for longer. Make your points, but don't go over time, and try and get engaged and try and get discussions going. Take notes about what the investors are saying. Follow up. Investors are busy. Some of them have very short attention spans. Some of them you have to chase. So chase them, until you get a no or they want to continue spending time looking at it. And just because you raise money doesn't mean you're successful. I mean, everyone's talking about, I'm a unicorn now. I'm worth $1 billion because I just raised, $100 million, whatever. That doesn't mean success. That's paper money. That doesn't mean anything. Well, it's not until you've exited, you got actual cash in your own bank account that you've been successful. Speed matters. Smart VCs want to see teams that move fast, execute fast, make decisions fast, hire fast. Because that's what can really make the difference in terms of building a team and company fast. Capital efficiency. I mean, if you think you're going to need to raise $50 or $100 million over the lifetime of your business, all I can say is good luck. I personally don't think that much money is needed to build smart game companies these days. There are, several game companies that have done that and would probably care to differ. But you know what? None of them have been in Europe. Supercell raised $13 million, and that was all the new money they ever raised. Make games with massive potential. Don't make games particularly that you want to make this special game. Make games that actually have the potential to reach millions of users and millions of players. And that's it. I'll just open it up to questions.
Questions?
Yeah.
On the follow-up piece, at what point in time do you get irritating to people in the sense that, I like the fact that you should try to get a no because that seems to be the way to get a yes, but when do you stop?
I don't believe that a hard sell is necessarily going to work. If someone is interested, they're going to be interested. But sometimes a soft sell can work. So you follow up a few times with emails or calls, and then if you're not getting feedback, then you should be having sort of every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, just sort of an email going out to your sort of key network of people that in the game sector or investors you talk to, and just say, here's an update, here's things we've been doing. And then it's more of a soft sell approach. So it's not necessarily irritating, as opposed to just like, hey, are you going to give us money or what? So that's what I would try. Any other questions? Yeah.
Use of funding. What do you like to see when people pitch to you? Do you want to see?
Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I said in terms of use of funding, what do you want to see in a pitch? Do you want to see it focused on growing the team, basically, building the right team and the right company, or do you want to see them think about UA early? Or do you want them to be basically self-sufficient with your round, or are you looking at it purely as a seed and then see what happens?
Now, use of funds is really important, particularly around the team and the salaries. We've had pitches where people were coming in and thought they were going to pay themselves $150,000 a year for a startup and take most of the equity. And we're like, good luck with that, because we're not going to touch that. And so it's got to be practical and based on. So let's say if it's a seed, and let's say you're raising $1 million, just to keep it simple, most of that money is probably going to be in terms of building the team, your overhead, and all that stuff. You're not going to have a huge sum for user acquisition. Maybe you'll have 20-25% of that. But spending huge amounts of user acquisition doesn't make zero sense until you reach the point with either testing your game or launching your game and seeing that the LTV is bigger than the user acquisition cost for users. It's not until that, once you've got to that magic part in your game, then you can go to your current investors or any investors and say, listen, I can demonstrate I can get a return, and then any monkey can figure out, well, I better give this guy money. So that's how I would probably look at it. It's kind of simplistic, but that's how I look at things. So,
Paul, so for your criteria before you're looking to invest, what percentage of weighting would you give to the team versus the product or the idea? And then maybe if you could drill down on that sort of team emphasis a little bit as to what excites you.
For us, it's number one's team. It's all about the team because we're investing so early. It's typically pre-product. We invested in Supercell. There were 6 guys in a 10 by 20 room in Helsinki, and they had a little bit of tech, and that's it. So I'd say weighting-wise, it's probably like 80% team. Because a great team will be able to figure out their way, because how a game or how a company starts isn't always the way it ends up. And, a team has to be able to sort of figure that out. They can't expect investors are going to figure out everything for them. So you've got to have, I think the bar's gone up, and so in our view, you need to have the ability to make great games, the ability to find users, retain users, monetize users, and just have common sense when it comes to how you're looking at your business and where you're thinking you're going to go over time. I mean, how you get there may take some time to figure out, or ways, and what's the speed at which that you're working at, because that makes a difference. Because we want to invest in teams that they can make decisions. They're not wasting months trying to figure out what they're going to do, or should they hire this person, should they fire this person. I mean, you just got to get on with it. And you learn that just by speaking to people and getting to know them. We just invested in a team called Dojo Madness in Berlin, and the speed at which they're moving is some of the fastest I've ever seen. And one of the founders has his ability just to find amazing people, hire them really quickly at really reasonable salaries. And the culture there is like, wow. And then that's the type of stuff that really impresses investors, impresses us.
I have a question about the ecosystem for funding mobile games. What are your thoughts about different locations in the world? So, for example, here in Silicon Valley, I've raised millions of dollars for mobile games since 2010, and I'm an angel investor myself and have invested in a lot of mobile game companies. But now, most investors, VCs here in Silicon Valley are like, okay, another mobile game company. I did that. I invested in a bunch of those already. It's kind of past. Even as an angel investor, I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to invest that much more in mobile game companies. But as an entrepreneur, I'm still trying to raise money for a mobile game company. And it's relatively tough around here. So my question is, are there parts of the world where investors in general are more receptive to
No, I think it's generally got tougher. Particularly if you look at mobile, look how much more competitive it is now versus just 3 years ago. If you've got a great team, I don't think it's too difficult to raise a seed round, but getting a Series A round's a whole lot more difficult because you basically have to show some traction. VCs doing Series A are not necessarily game experts; they deal in numbers. You got to show them good traction. And I think that's pretty typical everywhere. I think the only difference is that when I talked about the strategics, they are picking up some of that slack because they have a different view. They're focused more on, they're looking very much at it from a strategic level, sort of filling up their strategic pipelines wherever they're publishing in the world. And they've got loads of cash that they can put to work. But I think it's definitely more difficult to raise a Series A than 2-3 years ago.
I think this is all the time that we have right now. I want to thank Paul Heydon. Excellent presentation, very, very useful to, I'm sure, all of you here. Thanks again. This was really great.
Okay, thank you.